While my grandfather was in intensive care, my own parents had withdrawn $300,000 from my account, the money I had saved to save him. My sister just wrinkled her nose and said, "We need that money more than he does." And my father added, "He should just die so we can get his inheritance." And then the front door opened with a bang. The front door rattled open, and my hands froze on the keypad of my phone. I sat in my parents' living room with the bank's app open on the screen, and I couldn't believe my eyes. $300,000. Gone. Just ceased to exist in the account I had so carefully funded for the past 4 years. What happened to my money? My voice sounded foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. My mother looked up from the magazine and pressed her lips together, that familiar gesture that always heralded a storm. "Laurel, don't get hysterical. We were just making a transfer." Dad entered the room with a cup of coffee. He had the same smile on his face that he saved for difficult conversations with clients. I knew that smile from childhood. It never meant anything good. "You mean the money from your account?" he asked as casually as if it were a few dollars. "We had to use it. Temporarily, of course." I stood up, feeling my knees weaken. Pain mixed with rage was growing in my chest. "Temporarily?" "Dad, that's all my savings. This money is for Grandpa Harrison's surgery. The doctors said we have less than a month to—" "Oh my God!" Mom interrupted, with an irritated wave of her hand. "Your grandfather is dying, Laurel. The surgery will only delay the inevitable. This money will be much more useful to the living." I didn't recognize those people. Were they really my parents? The same ones who taught me compassion, honesty, family values? "Did you steal my money?" I whispered, still hoping for some reasonable explanation. "The money I'd raised by denying myself everything, working overtime in oncology. To save Grandpa." Dad set the cup down on the table with an annoying clatter. "Don't be dramatic, Laurel. We're your parents. We can't steal from you. It was a joint account in which I am listed as the second owner." It's like the room shook. Yeah, technically he was right. When I was 23, they insisted on opening a joint account for my own safety. I trusted them completely. Even when I moved into my own apartment at 27, even when I started working as a nurse, I'd left that account intact. It was convenient, and it showed my trust. "What do you need that money for?" My voice trembled, but I continued to stand straight. My mother put the magazine aside and sighed, as if I were a naughty child. "Your father had some business difficulties. We had to act quickly." I shifted my gaze to my father. His construction company had always been stable. At least that's what he claimed at family dinners. What kind of predicament is worth $300,000 and your father's life? The dishes clinked in the kitchen. My younger sister Faith appeared in the doorway, looking at us with wide-open eyes. At 24, she still lived with her parents and was completely dependent on them. "What's going on?" she asked. "Nothing," her mother cut her off. "Laurel is just making a scene for money. For money to save Grandpa." I was practically screaming. "He's dying in the hospital while you—" "Stop it." My dad raised his voice. "We've already discussed it with the doctors. The chances are too slim. It's a waste of money." 30% is not a slim chance," I argued vehemently. "It's almost a third. If it were you, would you consider it wasted money too?" Mother stood up and walked over to the bar, pouring herself a whiskey. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This was so unlike her. "Honey," she turned to me with fake tenderness, "we all have to be practical. Your grandfather has lived a long life. He's 83, and this money could help our family right now." I can't believe I'm hearing this. I shook my head. "What happened to you?" Dad sank into his chair and ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. "I've made some bad investments," he admitted, "and there are problems with the IRS. We needed to cover our debts right away, or we'd lose everything. And that's why you decided to steal my money? The money that could have saved Grandpa?" Faith walked slowly into the room, her gaze darting between us. "Laurel," she began quietly, "is there anything we can do to help Grandpa in a different way?" Stop it! Dad pounded his fist on the table. The decision has been made. The money has already been transferred. And frankly, it's time to face the truth. I froze, feeling my insides grow cold. What truth? My mother took a sip of whiskey and looked at me with an indifference I'd never seen in her eyes before. We need that money more than he does, she said, wrinkling her nose. We have our whole lives ahead of us. He doesn't. I gasped in shock and pain, feeling my eyes fill with tears. But before I could answer, my father added, as if hammering in the last nail, he should just die so we can get his inheritance. At that moment, the front door swung open with a clatter. A man I barely recognized stood on the threshold. Uncle Mason, my father's brother. Tall, with gray in his dark hair and a hard expression. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. I couldn't believe you were capable of this, Robert, he said, looking at my father. But I guess I always underestimated your greed. My father jumped to his feet, his face contorted with rage. What the hell are you doing in my house? I was just passing through, Mason said calmly. I thought I'd drop in on my brother after all these years. The door was ajar, and what I heard... He shook his head. Impressive even for you, Robert. Get out, hissed his mother, rising from the couch. You're not welcome here. Uncle Mason ignored her, addressing me directly. Laurel, right? You've grown so much. The last time I saw you, you were what? 20? 21, I answered automatically, still in shock at what was happening. Mason, I'm serious. My father stepped forward. Get out, or I'll call the police. For the first time in my life, I felt something break inside me. It was as if the thin thread that bound me to my parents had broken completely. I looked at those people and didn't recognize them. Or maybe it was the first time I'd ever seen them for real. How could you? My voice was quiet but firm. Grandpa Harrison was always there for me. He helped me with my studies, supported me when you were too busy doing your own thing. He was the only one who came to my medical school graduation because you had an important business meeting. Dash Laurel, my father began warningly. No, I held up my hand. Now you're going to listen to me. I spent years doing everything you wanted me to do. I went to medical school, even though I'd dreamed of something else. I broke up with Elliot because you didn't think he was promising enough. Worked overtime in a ward where I see people dying every day to raise money for my grandfather's surgery. Tears ran down my cheeks, but I wasn't ashamed of them anymore. And you stole that money. You're willing to kill your own father for the inheritance. Who are you? I don't know you. My mother rolled her eyes. Stop the melodrama, Laurel. You've always been too emotional. Maybe for the first time in my life, I'm not emotional enough, I retorted. I'm gonna get that money back and save Grandpa. Dad laughed, a cold, unfamiliar laugh. And how are you going to do that? The money has already been used to pay off the debts. They're gone. I felt the ground go from under my feet. My last hope was dissolving. Then I'll find another way, I said, not knowing what it would be. I won't let him die. Laurel, Uncle Mason intervened. I can help. I have some savings. Shut up, Dad growled. Stay out of my family's business. It's my family too, Mason said calmly. And I care about my father as much as I care about his granddaughter. Unlike some people, Faith suddenly came over to me and squeezed my hand. Laurel, she whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the money. Dad turned to Faith. Get away from her! Now. For the first time, I saw the uncertainty on my sister's face. She hesitated, but then took a step back, lowering her eyes. If you leave now with him, Mother pointed to Uncle Mason, you may not come back, ever. I looked at them both, feeling strangely calm amidst the storm of emotions. Okay, I said, picking up my bag from the chair. Dash, goodbye. Laurel? Dash, my father's voice sounded less confident. Don't be stupid. We're your family. I stopped in the doorway and turned around. Family doesn't do things the way you do, and I won't be a part of it anymore. Uncle Mason silently followed me to the exit. As we stepped onto the porch, I heard my mother yell something about ingratitude, and my father threatened to disinherit me. Those words didn't matter anymore. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Mason asked when we reached his tattered pickup truck. I shook my head. My apartment was small, with minimal furnishings, most of my paycheck I'd been saving for my grandfather's surgery. Now it felt like my whole life was built on lies. "I can offer a couch in my house," he said. "Not a palace, but the roof is secure." I looked at the near stranger, who had suddenly become my only ally. "Why are you helping me?" He started the engine and was silent for a long moment before answering, "Because your grandfather is my father, and because I know what it's like when Robert betrays you." As we drove away from the house, I didn't look back. Ahead was the unknown. Behind was the ruins of what I thought was my life. The only thing I knew for sure was that I had to save Grandpa Harrison. At any cost. Uncle Mason's house was a small, one-story structure on the outskirts of town. It was already dark when we pulled up. I sat silently in the car, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. In a few hours, my life had been completely turned upside down. "Sorry about the mess," Mason said, opening the front door and turning on the lights. I wasn't expecting company. Clutter was a bit of a stretch. The house was austere, but surprisingly clean. Simple furniture, minimal decor, but it felt cozy. "The sofa folds out," he continued, nodding at the worn but sturdy sofa in the living room. "Bathroom's over there, kitchen's over here. Make yourself at home." I nodded, unable to find the words. Mason Kinsey was almost a stranger to me. I'd seen him a few times when I was a kid, but I vaguely remembered those encounters. Then he just disappeared from our lives. "Thank you," I finally said, "for everything." He waved his hand. "Hungry?" I wanted to say no, but my stomach rumbled. I realized I hadn't eaten anything since this morning. "There's scrambled eggs and toast," Mason suggested. "Nothing fancy. Sounds fine." While he cooked, I sank down on the couch and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Faith and one message, "I'm sorry." Really sorry, but no word from my parents. What did I expect, though? "Here." Mason set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. "How long have you seen your grandfather?" "The day before yesterday." I gratefully accepted the food. "His condition is deteriorating. The doctors say he doesn't have more than a month without surgery." Mason sank heavily into the chair across from me. "And how much does this operation cost?" $350,000. I grinned bitterly. I had 300, almost 4 years' worth of savings. I was planning to take out a loan for the rest. He whistled. "And your parents just took." I couldn't bring myself to say the word stole. "Withdrawn through a joint account." I was so stupid to trust them. Mason shook his head. "It's not stupid, Laurel. It's okay to trust family." I set my fork aside, feeling a lump come up in my throat. "You know, Grandpa Harrison always told me the same thing. Family is everything, Laurel." He was the only one who ever really supported me. The summer before I started college came to mind. I was 18 and sitting on the porch of my grandfather's house, crushed by yet another future talk with my parents. "I don't want to go to medical school, Grandpa," I admitted then. "I want to study literature." Grandpa Harrison, with his piercing blue eyes and soft smile, looked at me for a long time. "And what do you want to do with literature, honey?" "Writing," I smiled dreamily. "Or teach." "I love books. Love the way words create whole worlds." He nodded without interrupting. "But my mom says it's a waste of time. That with a medical degree, I'd have stability. Dad says he won't pay for a useless degree." Grandpa sighed heavily. "You know, Laurel, sometimes parents want the best for us, but they see that best in their own way. They love you, but they're afraid you'll make their mistakes." "What mistakes?" "Your mom once dreamed of a different path, too. She wanted to be an artist." I stared at him in amazement. My mother, Sharon Kinsey, was always the paragon of practicality. I'd never seen her pick up a paintbrush. "But her parents insisted on accounting," Grandpa continued. "She obeyed, and maybe she never forgave them for it, or herself for not fighting for her dream. That day, Grandpa didn't tell me what to do. He just listened. And then he offered a compromise. If you really think medicine isn't your calling, I'll help you with your studies. But if you decide to give it a try, I'll support you too. I ended up going to medical school, not because of my parents, but because something changed after talking to my grandfather. I realized I could help people without losing myself. Grandpa paid for most of my tuition, despite my parents' protests that I should earn my own money for my choice. He was very proud of you. Mason's voice brought me back to the present. When he and I talked on the phone occasionally, he always talked about his nurse granddaughter saving lives. I looked up in surprise. Had you two been in touch? Mason nodded. Secretly from Robert, of course. Your father is complicated, man. What happened between you two? I couldn't help my curiosity. Why did you stop talking? He stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. It's a long and ugly story, he said at last. Your father was always ambitious, always wanted more. I was the eldest, and in his opinion, I always got the best. But that's not true, is it? I could see his shoulders tense. No, Mason turned around. Our father, your grandfather, was a fair man. He never singled any of us out, but Robert, he saw what he wanted to see. I set my empty plate aside and wrapped my arms around my knees. What had happened? 10 years ago, Robert and I were partners, Mason began, returning to his chair. The construction company that he now owned alone had originally been ours. Kinsey Brothers. It was doing well, too good. He fell silent, gathering his thoughts. Your father always wanted to expand, take more orders, take more risks. I was more cautious. It created tension. And then came the opportunity for a big contract with the city, a multi-million-dollar redevelopment project in the historic district. I had never heard of this project, although I was 22 at the time and should have known about the family business. We applied, but lost to another company, Mason continued. Robert was furious. He was convinced we deserved the contract. And then, something in him snapped. Mason rubbed his face with his hands, as if trying to erase a heavy memory. 2 weeks after the results were announced, the company's accounting department discovered a shortfall. A big one, almost $500,000. The police started investigating, and all the evidence pointed to me. You were framed, I whispered, even though I already knew the answer. Yes. Robert forged documents, moved the money through my accounts. It looked like I'd been stealing from the company for years. I never had a chance to prove my innocence. You went to jail. He nodded. 3 years. Not the most pleasant time of my life. He grinned wryly. When I got out, the company was already thriving under Robert's sole management. My father didn't believe I was guilty, but he was too old and sick to make a difference. I remembered how my father always refused to talk about his brother. I don't have a brother. He had cut him off when I once asked about Uncle Mason. My mom shushed me and told me to never bring it up. After I was released, I tried to get back in touch with my family, Mason continued. Not for the company or the money. It's family. But Robert convinced everyone that I was dangerous, that I could steal from them too. Even Grandpa? No, Mason smiled. Harrison Kinsey knows his sons too well. We've met secretly a few times, called each other. He helped me get back on my feet, gave me money to open a small repair shop. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the whole story. Why didn't you try to prove your innocence? After prison? What would be the point? He shrugged. There was no proof, and a ruined reputation can't be repaired by a court decision. I decided to make a clean slate. There was no bitterness in his voice, only weariness. I looked at this man I'd spent my whole life thinking of as a stranger, as dangerous, and I saw more honesty in him than I'd ever seen in my own father. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Don't be, he smiled. I've found my way. My business is small, but honest. I have a roof over my head and food on the table, and I don't have to wake up every morning hating the man in the mirror. We were silent for a moment, each absorbed in our own thoughts. What about you? Mason asked. Dad said you broke things off with some guy at their insistence? I flinched, surprised that he remembered that detail from my emotional outburst at my parents' house. Elliot! The name flew off my lips before I could think. Elliot Ramirez. I'd met him sophomore year of medical school. He was different. I remembered our first date, a picnic on the roof of the dorm, where Elliot had read Pablo Neruda's poems to me in Spanish and then awkwardly translated them, always slurring and blushing. I remembered his laugh, warm and open, his enthusiasm for surgery and art, his ability to see beauty in the most ordinary things. My parents immediately disliked him, I continued. He was poor, the son of immigrants, on a scholarship. Dad called him unpromising and a burden. Mom thought he was using me. Mason hummed. That sounds familiar. We were together for 2 years. I stared at my hands. We were planning to get married after internship. And then, I remembered the night my parents had invited me over for a serious talk. They showed me printouts from my grandfather's bank account, large sums of money transferred to my tuition. Your grandfather is going broke because of you, my mother said then. If you continue your foolish affair with that boy, he will lose everything he has accumulated in his life. It's your choice. The father was ruthless. Either you end it with Elliot and we help Grandpa, or you continue this foolishness and ruin the one person who has always supported you. I was young and scared and naive. I believed them. I broke off the engagement, I said quietly to Mason. Told Elliot I didn't love him, that it was a mistake. He didn't believe me, begged me to explain, but I was cruel. On purpose. To make sure he'd leave. Mason looked at me with understanding. And Grandpa? They lied. I grinned bitterly. Of course Grandpa wasn't broke. I found out the truth later when I overheard them talking by accident. They were afraid that I would marry and stop being their obedient daughter, that I wouldn't support them in their old age. Didn't you try to fix it? Find this Elliot guy? I shook my head. By then, he'd already left for the other side of the country. And I decided he deserved better than a girl who couldn't fight for their love. That wasn't the only sacrifice I made for my family. Giving up my dream of being a writer, choosing a major at my parents' insistence, moving closer to them instead of a prestigious internship in another city. I'd always put their wishes before my own. You know, Mason said slowly, there's a difference between caring for your loved ones and complete self-denial. The first is love. The second is slow suicide. His words hit me hard. I suddenly realized how long I'd been living someone else's life. How I'd let my parents make decisions for me, even the most important ones. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, feeling lost. Grandpa's dying, no money, probably no job either if my parents decide to get revenge. Mason stood up and gathered the dishes. You need to rest now. Tomorrow we'll go to the hospital, visit your father, and then we'll figure out how to get your money back. Do you really think that's possible? I think your parents committed a financial crime, he said firmly. And unlike what happened to me, we have you as a witness. That's something. That night, lying on the fold-out couch in the house of a complete stranger, I thought about my life, about all the times I had let others decide for me, about the years spent trying to earn the approval of people who, as it turned out, only saw me as a means to their ends. Grandpa Harrison told me once, kindness is a strength, not a weakness, Laurel, but only if you don't let others turn it into chains. I hadn't understood those words then. Now, staring up at the dark ceiling of a stranger's house, I was beginning to realize their true meaning. And another thing, perhaps it was time to break those chains. The morning greeted me with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. I lay there for a while, trying to remember where I was before reality hit again. My parents stole my money. My grandfather is dying. I'm living in the house of an uncle I barely know. Good morning, Mason greeted me as I walked into the kitchen. Coffee? Thank you. I accepted the cup. What's the plan? He smiled at my candor. I contacted a friend. He's a lawyer who specializes in family financial disputes. We're meeting in an hour. The lawyer, Daniel Fisher, was a thin man with attentive eyes and a quiet voice. His small office was cluttered with file folders, yet surprisingly organized. "The case is complicated," he said after hearing my story. "A joint account legally means that both owners have equal rights to the funds. Technically, your father didn't commit theft. But it's my money," I objected. "I earned every penny of it." Daniel nodded. "I understand. But the law sees things differently. There are nuances, though. If you can prove that the money was earmarked for a specific purpose, your grandfather's treatment, and that your father knew about it." "He knew," I said firmly. "Everyone knew. I've been talking about it for years." "Is there any written proof? Emails, texts?" I thought for a moment, going over our conversations. "I wrote to my parents about raising money for the surgery, and there's correspondence with doctors where I discussed the financial side of the treatment." "That might help," Daniel nodded. "But be prepared for a long process, and for your relationship with your parents to deteriorate permanently." "They already are," I said quietly. After the meeting with the lawyer, Mason and I drove to the hospital. My heart clenched at the thought of Grandpa. What would I tell him? How would I explain that the money was gone? The hospital room greeted us with dimmed lights and the measured beeping of equipment. Grandpa Harrison looked smaller than I remembered, as if the disease was eating away at him. His gray hair was strewn across the pillow, his face gaunt. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Laurel," he whispered. "Dash. My girl." I leaned down, kissing his cheek. "How are you, Grandpa?" "Alive for now." He grinned weakly and shifted his gaze to Mason. "Son." Mason walked over to the bed, squeezing his father's shoulder awkwardly. "Dash." "Hey, Dad." "You two are together." Grandpa shifted his gaze from me to Mason. "That's good. It's really good." I couldn't hold back the tears. "Grandpa, there's something I need to tell you." But he interrupted me with a wave of his hand. "I know, Laurel. Robert came by yesterday, told me that the money was used." I was furious. Not only had my father stolen the money, but he had come to brag about it to a dying man. "I'll get it back," I said firmly. "I swear I'll find a way to pay for the operation." Grandpa squeezed my hand weakly. "Don't blame yourself, girl. I've lived a good life. And you'll live many more years." I wasn't ready to give up. "The operation will give you a chance." At that moment, the door of the room opened and the doctor came in. I turned and the world stopped. Elliot. Elliot Ramirez. My Elliot. He froze when he saw me too, and something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, pain, maybe a glimmer of his old feelings. "Laurel," he said, quickly regaining his professional demeanor. "I didn't know you were here. Do you work here?" I couldn't believe the coincidence. "I transferred 2 months ago," he answered. "I'm a cardiac surgeon." Suddenly, I realized that Elliot was the doctor who was supposed to operate on my grandfather. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. "Dash Dr. Ramirez," Grandpa said in a weak voice. "Do you know my granddaughter?" Elliot nodded, walking over to the bed and checking the monitor's readings. "We went to school together, Mr. Kinsey." That was such an understatement that I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. We loved each other. We planned a life together. And now we were talking like strangers. "How is he?" I asked, trying to keep my tone professional. Elliot looked at me seriously. "Stable, but it's getting worse. The surgery can't be delayed more than 2 weeks." Mason, who had been silently observing our conversation, stepped forward. "Dash Dr. Ramirez, may I speak to you privately?" They walked out into the hallway, leaving me with my grandfather. "He's a good man," Grandpa said quietly. "You're Elliot." I flinched. "Did you know?" "You used to bring him to me, remember? Before it was over." Grandpa smiled weakly. "I saw the way you looked at each other, and I saw how you changed after the breakup. I shouldn't have let him go," I whispered. "We all make mistakes, Laurel. The question is whether we can fix them." Our conversation was interrupted when Mason and Elliot returned. Elliot's face was serious, but there was a new gleam in his eyes. "Dash Ms. Kinsey." He became formal again. "I need to discuss your grandfather's treatment options with you. if you can spare me some time after your visit. When we left the room, Elliot led me into a small counseling room. Your uncle explained the situation. He began without preamble. I'm sorry about what happened. I lowered my eyes. Elliot, not now. He interrupted me gently. First, about your grandfather. I can help. How? I don't have any money. There's a program of our hospital's charitable foundation, he explained. I can put Mr. Kinsey on the list of candidates for funding, and I'm willing to do the surgery at the lowest possible rate. I couldn't believe my ears. You would do that? After everything I've been through. This isn't about us, Laurel, he said firmly. This is about a patient who needs help. Elliot's always been like that. Principled, willing to help no matter what the personal circumstances. That's one of the reasons I loved him. Thank you, I said sincerely. I don't know how to thank you. Just help me gather the necessary documents. He handed me the list. Maybe someday we can talk. About us. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When Mason and I got home, there was a surprise waiting for us. Faith was sitting on the porch, with her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. Faith? I rushed over to her. What's wrong? I left home, she said hoarsely. My parents and I had a big fight, about you and Grandpa. Mason opened the door. Let's continue this conversation inside. Over tea, Faith told me that after I left, the atmosphere at home had become unbearable. Her parents were fighting, her father was drinking, her mother was withdrawn. I started asking questions, Faith continued, about money, about Grandpa. At first, they dismissed it, then they got angry. And then yesterday, I found something. She pulled a flash drive out of her bag. These are copies of documents from my dad's computer. He doesn't know I copied them. Mason plugged the flash drive into his laptop, and we leaned over the screen. What we saw stunned even him. Son of a bitch, Mason whispered. He'd been stealing from his father for years. The documents showed systematic transfers from my grandfather's personal accounts to offshore accounts opened in my father's name. The amounts varied, but the totals were shocking, more than $1 million over the last 5 years. How did he gain access? I asked, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal. Power of attorney, Faith answered. Grandpa signed it 3 years ago when he had his first heart attack, for emergencies. And Robert took advantage of it. Mason shook his head. Classic. There's something else, Faith said quietly. I found tapes of my father's conversations with my grandfather's doctors. He asked them not to push for the surgery. He said Grandpa was too old, that it was better to let him go with dignity. I was shaking with rage. He wanted Grandpa to die, to get the inheritance, and to avoid exposing his machinations, Mason added. As long as my father was alive, there was always the risk that he'd find the money missing. I stood up, feeling unusually determined. I'm filing a police report on them. Today. Faith looked at me fearfully. Are you sure? They're our parents. They stopped being my parents the moment they decided that money was more important than human life, I said firmly, and I won't let them get away with it. At the police station, we were received by Detective Hartman, a calm, middle-aged woman with a discerning eye. She listened carefully to my story, studied the documents I had brought with me. Ms. Kinsey, she finally said, there are indications of several crimes here. Financial fraud, abuse of power of attorney, maybe even attempted murder. But I must warn you, investigating a case like this is going to be complicated and very personal. I understand, I said. But someone is trying to kill my grandfather. I have to stop it. The detective nodded and handed me an application form. Then let's get started. When I signed the document, my hand didn't shake. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing the absolute right thing, no matter how high the cost. The next 2 weeks changed me more than the previous 32 years of my life. After filing the police report, I woke up feeling like I'd dropped the heavy backpack I'd been lugging around for years. For the first time, I acted not out of fear of disappointing my parents, but out of confidence that I was right. Detective Hartman warned me the investigation would take time. While justice took its slow steps, I couldn't stand idly by. Grandpa needed surgery, and I was determined to find the money. I have a plan, I announced to Mason and Faith over breakfast. Elliot had talked about the hospital's charity fund, but they only covered part of the cost. We still need to raise at least $150,000. That sounds like a lot of money, Faith sighed. Not for someone who's willing to fight, I smiled. I talked to the head of the department. She's authorized me to take extra shifts. I'm also organizing a fundraiser. My phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered. It was my mother. Laurel. Her voice sounded strangely uncertain. We need to talk. I put Mason and Faith on speakerphone. I'm listening. The police came to our house yesterday. How could you, Laurel? We're your family. Family doesn't steal from each other, I said firmly. And you don't wish the death of a loved one. These are ridiculous accusations. Your father was trying to save the business. He would have paid you back. When? After Grandpa died? You've always been ungrateful. We gave you everything, and you repaid us with lies and betrayal. I only lied to myself, I said calmly, when I believed you loved me. After a pause, she spoke again. Laurel, withdraw your application. You'll regret it. We could destroy your reputation, your career. Your father has connections. Goodbye, Mom. Tell your father I'll see him in court soon. I disconnected the call and looked at Faith. I've never heard you talk to her like that, she whispered. Me neither, I smiled. And you know what? It felt good. From that day on, I worked like a man possessed. I picked up any extra shifts at the hospital, often staying overnight. In my rare spare time, I set up a fundraising page, sent letters to charities. Faith turned out to be a talented organizer. She created a touching video about her grandfather, launched a social media campaign, and contacted journalists. The story of the old man, who tried to steal from his own children, touched many people. Mason offered $15,000, all his savings. When I tried to refuse, he said firmly, Harrison is my father. And the only one who believed in me when the world turned its back. Mason's neighbors organized a charity dinner in the local community. These ordinary people, mechanics, teachers, retirees, raised $28,000. Mason has helped a lot of people around here, the elderly woman explained. He fixed roofs for free, helped with repairs for those who couldn't pay. Now it's our turn to help. Thank you, I said, addressing the crowded room. You have shown me that a real family is not necessarily those with whom we are connected by blood. In the midst of all this activity, I visited my grandfather regularly. Elliot was always there for me, professional, but keeping his distance. One day, as Grandpa dozed off, Elliot suggested coffee in the hospital cafeteria. How are you doing? He asked. For real, no excuses. Strangely, though, better than I've ever been. For the first time, I feel like I'm living my own life. You've changed. In a bad way? No, he smiled. You've always been strong, Laurel. It's just that now you're finally letting yourself show it. We started seeing each other regularly, not as a couple, but as friends getting to know each other. Little by little, the ice between us melted. I have to explain why I pushed you away, I said one day. It was 7 years ago, Laurel, he said softly. No, I lied to you. Said I didn't love you because my parents made me choose between you and Grandpa. They assured me he was going broke because of my schooling. Elliot stopped, looking at me in pain. God, Laurel. I found out the truth too late. They lied about Grandpa's finances. They just wanted to control me. You know what the saddest part is? If you had told me the truth, we would have found a solution together. I never would have made you choose. I know, I replied quietly. That's why you deserved better than me. Don't say that. You were young and scared. We all make mistakes. Some mistakes can't be undone. We can try, he said softly. If both sides want to. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from Detective Hartman. Ms. Kinsey, we have some news. We found inconsistencies in your father's paperwork. It appears your grandfather's signatures on some of the powers of attorney have been forged. Are you sure? We've sent samples to forensics. At least 3 important documents contain forged signatures. Now we're talking forgery and fraud. We're preparing a warrant for your father's arrest. I ended the call and turned to Elliot. They found evidence. Dad was forging Grandpa's signatures. That's good, Elliot said cautiously. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Justice? I nodded, but tears came to my eyes. Yeah, but it's my father, you know? Despite everything, I didn't want him to go to prison. The next day, what we had all feared happened. Grandpa's condition worsened dramatically. Elliot called me at work. Laurel, you need to come down here right away. Your grandfather's having a massive heart attack. At the hospital, Grandpa was transferred to intensive care. His pale face almost blended in with the pillow, many tubes entangling his frail body. Laurel, we can't wait any longer, Elliot said. We need the surgery now, 3 days at the most, or it will be too late. How much have we collected so far? I asked Faith. 87,000. With the charity fund and Elliot's discount, there was still a 60,000 hole. I bit my lip, frantically considering my options. I could take out a loan. With your credit history? Faith objected softly. After your parents used your information for several loans, banks won't give you that much money. Suddenly, I remembered my grandmother's necklace, the antique sapphire and diamond jewelry that Grandma Eleanor had bequeathed to me, the only thing of real value. There is one option, I said slowly. You can't sell the necklace, Mason objected. Your grandfather would object. He was right. Grandpa always said that necklace was part of our family history. It had been passed down for almost 150 years. I don't have a choice, I said firmly. What's more important, a family heirloom or a man's life? Maybe there's another way, Elliot suggested. What if we pawn the necklace? Not sell it, but use it as collateral? I know a jeweler, Mason said. He's an honest man, and he'll be able to appraise the necklace at its real value. I went up to my grandfather's room. He was asleep, his breathing ragged. I took his hand in mine. I'm sorry, Grandpa, I whispered. I know how important it is for you to keep the necklace in the family, but I can't lose you. His eyelids fluttered, and he squeezed my hand weakly. Laurel, you're here. Yes, Grandfather. And I'm not going anywhere. I heard the doctors were talking about surgery. It's gonna be okay. We found the money. Elliot will operate on you in 2 days. His eyes opened wider. How? Your parents. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you get better. He stared at me for a long time. The necklace, he finally whispered. You want to sell Grandma's necklace. Grandfather, No. Eleanor wanted you to have it. It's all that's left of her, and I need you to keep it. I leaned in closer. The necklace is just a thing. You're my real family. He closed his eyes and a tear rolled down his cheek. You're so much like your grandmother. Just as stubborn, just as strong. Promise me something, Laurel. Anything. Promise that one day, if you can, you'll return the necklace to the family. I kissed his wrinkled forehead. I promise. As I left the room, I found Mason, Faith, and Elliot in the waiting area. I'll do it, I said firmly. I'll pawn the necklace tonight. As we were leaving the hospital, I noticed my father coming through the main doors. He looked gaunt and aged. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw something like remorse in his eyes. But then his face hardened, and he looked away. Are you okay? Elliot asked quietly. Yeah, I answered, straightening my back. More than okay. And it was true. I wasn't afraid of my father anymore. I didn't seek his approval. I didn't need his love. I was stronger than he had ever expected. There was the parting with a family heirloom and the anxious wait for surgery ahead. But there were no more doubts inside me. Only confidence in my choice and a willingness to fight to the end. The 3rd day after Grandpa's surgery was sunny. I sat by his bedside, watching his chest rise and fall smoothly. The tubes and wires that had entangled his body a short time ago were almost gone. Elliot said the surgery had been a success, though recovery would take time. Next to my chair was a fresh newspaper with the headline, "Famous Businessman Robert Kinsey Accused of Fraud." The story had gotten out, despite my parents' best efforts to keep it quiet. It didn't bother me now, though. 2 weeks ago, the day before my surgery, I was summoned to see my parents' lawyer. I expected threats and pressure, but instead, I got a settlement offer. They would give me back $300,000, give up trying to control my grandfather's estate, and admit to forging documents. Why did they agree? I asked Daniel Fisher. The evidence is too compelling, he replied, and a public scandal would ruin their reputation for good. So I got the money at the last minute. The jeweler returned the necklace, and the transaction was on time. I flinched when Grandpa Harrison opened his eyes. Laurel. His voice sounded weak, but more confident than before. You're here again. Of course, I smiled, squeezing his hand. How do you feel? Like a man who's had his chest cut open and his heart ripped out, he grinned wryly. But alive, thanks to you. And Elliot, I added. He's a brilliant surgeon. Grandpa studied my face with that special scrutiny that always made me feel like he was seeing more than I was showing. Have you made a decision about that job in Portland? I nodded. A week ago, I got a call from a large private hospital on the West Coast. They were looking for an experienced nurse for the cardiology department. I'm on my way. They're expecting me in a month. Good. He smiled weakly. You need to move on, Laurel. Build your life. What about you? I frowned. You have a long recovery ahead of you. Mason found a great place near his house. It's a private board and care facility. It's beautiful, quiet. I knew about it. Mason had already shown me the place, a bright house with spacious rooms and a garden where Grandpa could walk during rehab. Are you sure? I could stay here, help you out. And miss an opportunity like this? He shook his head. No, sweetheart, I'll be fine. Mason will visit me every day, and you have to move forward. There was a quiet knock at the door, and Faith came in with a bouquet of wildflowers. Hello, travelers. She kissed her grandfather on the cheek. How is our hero feeling? Better every day, he answered. And you seem to be blossoming too. Faith had really changed in the last month. When she moved into Mason's with me, it was as if she'd thrown off invisible shackles. She'd taken graphic design classes, found a part-time job at a small studio. I brought news, she said, putting the flowers in a vase. My parents are selling the house. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Really? Yes, Faith nodded. Dad lost most of his clients after the scandal. They'll have to start over, on a smaller scale. Have you talked to them? Grandfather asked cautiously. Only on the phone. Faith lowered her eyes. They wanted me to come back. They said it would be hard for me without their support. And what did you say? She looked up, and I saw a new confidence in her eyes. That I had a real family. You, Laurel, Mason. People who love me, not control me. Grandpa smiled. Proud of you, girl. Leaving Grandpa to rest, Faith and I walked out into the hospital garden. Laurel, she began hesitantly. I was wondering, can I go to Portland with you? I looked at her in surprise. Are you serious? Absolutely, she nodded. They have great design classes there, and I don't want to stay here, where everything reminds me of my parents. I hugged my sister, feeling how close we'd become during these hard weeks. Of course we can. We'll look for an apartment for two. That evening, I met Elliot at a small cafe near the hospital. He looked tired after a complicated surgery, but he smiled when he saw me. How is our patient? He asked when we sat down at a table. He's recovering. He's positive. I smiled. Thank you, Elliot. For everything. He shook his head. I was just doing my job. We both know you weren't. There was a pause between us, filled with unspoken words. I hear you're leaving, he finally said. Portland is a beautiful city. Yes. I met his gaze. A new beginning. You deserve it. I took a deep breath. Elliot, I was wondering, are there any clinics in Portland that might be interested in a talented heart surgeon? His eyes widened in surprise. Laurel, are you suggesting that I— No, I answered quickly. I mean, not exactly. I'm just thinking. Maybe we could try again? Not right away, of course. Little by little. Get to know each other again. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. That special smile I'd remembered all these years. I'd like that, he said quietly. Very much. A week before I left, I returned to Mason's house, where I found a small package by the door. Inside was my grandmother Eleanor's necklace, sapphires and diamonds, sparkling as if it had never left the family. Attached to the necklace was a note. This belongs to you by right. Wanted to surprise you. Mason! I clutched the necklace to my chest, feeling tears come to my eyes. Now I could keep my promise to my grandfather. The family heirloom had come home. That evening, as I was unpacking before moving, I found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a letter written in my mother's familiar, neat handwriting. Dear Laurel, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. What we did to your father is unforgivable. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Proud that you found the strength to stand up to us, to protect your grandfather, to build a life for yourself. Maybe someday you'll find room in your heart to at least listen to me. I'll wait as long as it takes. Love, Mom. I reread the letter twice, trying to figure out how I felt. Anger? Relief? Hope? A little bit of everything, I guess. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't answer it right away. It was up to me now to decide when and how to deal with my parents, if at all. The last day before we left, Faith and I visited Grandpa at his new house. He'd already settled in, made friends with the staff, and even made a friend, an elderly literature professor from the next room. Are you happy, Laurel? Grandpa asked as we sat in the garden under the old oak tree. I wondered, am I happy? After all I had been through, after the betrayal and the pain, after the struggle? Yes, I finally answered. I am free. For the first time in my life, I am doing what I want, not what others expect me to do. Grandpa took my hand, and I could feel how his grip had strengthened over the past weeks. You know what your grandmother used to say? True family isn't those bound by blood. It's those who will never let your blood be spilled in vain. I smiled, looking at Faith picking fall leaves nearby, thinking about Mason, who would be coming to visit his father soon, Elliot, who would be flying to Portland in a month for a job interview. All of these people had become my real family, the kind you choose for yourself, the kind based on love and respect, not control and obligation. I didn't know what the future would bring. Would I ever be able to forgive my parents? Would things work out with Elliot and me the second time around? Would Faith be happy in her new life? But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. I learned to trust myself, my decisions, my heart. I learned to stand up for what was important and let go of what had outlived its usefulness. After all, isn't that what true freedom is all about? Not the absence of ties, but the ability to choose which ties to keep and which to cut. Not loneliness, but the ability to decide with whom to share my life. I squeezed my grandfather's hand and looked at the horizon, where the sun was setting, coloring the sky in shades of gold and purple. There was a new day ahead, a new city, a new life, and I was ready to face them with an open heart and a lifted head.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.